second talk of this session by Carlos Maureira, together with Professor Juan-Carlos Letelier, joint work. Please, I will open your presentation. Just 1 second. This is the moment where we miss the women that are not working here today. Where we miss them much more. Do you have to give power? Okay, I'll give you power. 1 second. Do you? No. Now. Can you? No, with the pointer.
Yeah,
can you use the pointer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. First, I want to thank the organizer and for allowing us to present our work here and for gathering in this nice conference. So, what I'm going to present is a general framework that is addressing a fundamental problem in biology, but is taking into account some formalism that are coming from physics and mathematics. So, this was the original plan of the talk, so I want to be very fast on the first part, the first 3 parts, because we, during the conference, are seeing so much about that is nowhere to recall it. So I'm going to get more directly. So one of the motivation for this is that is when we observe the world, the reality that all of us perceive, we try to make some order of this. And so, we wonder whether it's some hidden structure of the world that we can reveal with science. So, our proposal is some sort of this answer, this revealing that there is some organization around that is coming first from the fact that we are living things. So it's going to be, if we extend our discussion, it's going to get into many things. So I would like to concentrate and focus on the main issue that is the modeling or the theoretical part of this talk. So we know that the quantum world is a little weird, so from foundational terms, and it's involving some epistemological and questions that they are very broad in science, but I would like to get to the part where we start as a living thing. So you already know that there is some mathematization about the quantum mechanics. So, and one of the framework that is more broad, we think, is the probabilistic framework. So in that case, you can recover the four rules in quantum mechanics and the interference terms from just a consideration of the contextual probability of the framework. So you can recover basically the classical and quantum statistical properties. So, and there is a lot of mathematics around that, but the thing is when you consider living things and you consider the cognition that they entail, in terms of human beings, you start asking about the cognition and decision making, and then the way that we approach this problem is basically in experimental way, where you get the data and you ask in some sort of mathematical formulation and psychological constraint of this experimental setting, and you try to find what are the underlying dynamics of the nervous system. So, and in psychological terms, it's already shown that they look like a framework of reference for a statistical analysis. The probability, classical kind of probability cosmologian, is not enough. So, from here you point that the quantum-like statistic of treatment of cognition can be more useful. So we think that that is just a consequence of living things. So the things is when you consider quantum cognition, you have a representation of the psychological process, okay, or experience during quantum cognition and decision making. You have conflict, ambiguity, confusion, uncertainty, and decision. So all these images are captured better by the framework of quantum-like phenomenology. So and also there is some other process in biology, like quantum biology itself, in the terms that you are addressing, for example, quantum mechanical effects on biology, like in the orientation on magnetic fields, or in the phototransduction system of the organism. But there is a representation of quantum work in all scales, from microscopical to macroscopical levels. So we think that one of the key points is that you have to consider the organism as a cognition device, and a special cognition device, and this was brought in Chile by Humberto Maturana and Francisco Varela, which developed what is called the autopoiesis and cognition theory, but in terms of what are the consequences of seeing an organism like an autopoietic machine that is building itself, is self-constructed. And the main issue here is where different aspects of living things come from. So they entail a concept that is called operational closure, or structural coupling, to emphasize that the living things, the organism, is in a continuous interaction with the medium. So they represent this space of interaction, like in the niche, and this interaction is also emerging semiotic content, the meaning of the objects created by the interaction of the organism and the environment create a meaningful niche to the organism. So that is essential. This idea are not new. The Antwerp of Jacob von Uxel is also present in this type of ideas, where he considered that the organism created through the interaction in the environment, the physiological and the behavioral status that implies the capability of knowing and meaning of the niche. So this is more modern terms is called affordance. So there is and the last one is something that is called or developed like a variational method to embody active inference. So there is a number of theories or frameworks around that consider the organism as a machine that is constructing the meaningful objects around him, and that is called constructivism. So, with all these ideas, we start to think in a framework that can use these ideas and express it in a mathematical way. So it turned out that you are going to approach a big challenge because you wonder whether there is a formal definition of life, for instance. So we come about with this that you have, you need to, as a constraint of your model or your theory, you need to explain the biogenesis of living things, so the origin of life. You have to explain how you evolve over time as creating diversity and the diversity of living forms that we observe today, and also you have to explain cognition on these living things. So it's a kind of a broad framework, but we think that we are in the right path. So many things of this are being already addressed on the framework of autopoiesis and cognition theory, but in more qualitative terms. So our framework that we call the Biological Organization Principles, or BOP, is going to be, has to be understood as an extension of autopoiesis and cognition, and is going to use two main concepts, the biological closure and structural coupling, to engage in a mechanistic way to explain the phenomenological issues around biology or living. So we came with something that is central that we call the dynamical closure mechanism, that is using these two concepts, the biological concept, and is getting as a result the system dynamics and the niche that we call system dynamic and niche duality, because it's they are interplay in an historical process. And for this we use several, as I say, physical and mathematical concepts like the least stationary action principle. We think that this has to be related with symplectic geometry, but mainly we use the Kant theory to account for the dynamics of a living organization. So this is represented in this scheme, where we are going to start with something like is represented like a fasor or a vector in some space, like for example the Hilbert space, and it's going to be moving around in a cyclic way, because the result of this is some sort of mechanistic embedding that is taking many hierarchical levels and ensembling together. So this is a summary of this theoretical framework, so I can get to the cognition and stuff sooner. But basically, we have some equations that define a Hamiltonian, a stochastic Hamiltonian for a biological system that is represented by these symbols, a Hamiltonian stochastic for biology. And it comes from the limit of a long time dynamics that is around the expectation of a stochastic Hamiltonian that comes from interaction networks. And these interaction networks are ensembled by something that we call these functional symmetries. They are a sort of duality between functional states. And these Hamiltonians that they are defined in this way also, they have some interaction with the medium that is represented here by a convolution with the physical Hamiltonian, and a function that is representing the interaction with the medium. So we can, from this derivate, including the notion of a biological closure and structural coupling, dynamics that is performing according to the Kant theorem, and is also considering a change on the Hamiltonian according to something equivalent to the Schrödinger equation. Additionally, these dynamics what is telling you that we are forming different lineage, because this mechanism is formulating some system that is not accounting for a living system, it's accounting for some part of the living system that they start to bring some dynamics inside. So they create this sort of a lineage that they evolve in time and continually changing according to the constraint of Kant theory. That means that you have some sort of a geometry for living things, and they are consistent from embeddings that they are complex geometries. They are following the path of enclosed by Kant theory, and they follow Kant surface. Okay, and of course they follow all the Kant dynamics that contains inside. So basically, this is a summary. We are going to get into defining an identity, because the system is constructing historically a process that is getting involved in the definition of the structure and function that the system is going to have. So we are going to have some relationship through the mechanism between the structure, function, and the identity, and also between the organization, the construction, and the reference for the system. So it's going to show some ways that you can implement the bioevolution of the system that is in agreement with the vision or the point of view, the natural evolution by natural drift. And it's going to have some sort of cognitive properties explained by what we call biologically organized cognitive machines. So for the one that they don't know, the Kant theorem is basically a theorem on the stability of the Hamiltonian system, and it's what is telling you that it's a Hamiltonian that is integrable. When you perturb with a Hamiltonian that is not integral, you get small perturbation, you deform the dynamics of the system by little amounts where you start to they start to appear some different dynamics. So this is the basic dynamic of an integrable system, where you have basically constant of motions, and then you start to transform this constant of motion in quasi-periodic orbits, and they start to appear more structural on this manifold of attraction. And if you get into a large perturbation, you are going to get very few quasi-periodic motion, and the rest is going to be or show a chaotic dynamics. So there's several dynamics in these regimes. They are very interesting, but you have mainly something that is called soft chaos, that is some dynamic is extracting the chaos into the periodic orbits. So, and also you have some diffusional process around the orbit that is called the Arnold stochastic diffusion, and there are some chaotic regimes that are characterized like the Nikola-Jev regime, and they have overall the spectrum, Lyapunov spectrum. So this is a complex dynamics, but the main issue is that you can get into this by small perturbation of the Hamiltonian that is not integrable. So, as a result of this approach to autopoiesis, we get to something that we call the biologically organized cognitive machines, and these cognitive machines are very different from what we know as computing machines. In terms of Turing machines, they have different bytes in terms of they are not binary or quantum. They have a mixture of this, and they do not operate in accordance to a specific architecture. They are not tied to a specific architecture. They create this, And also, when you compare the Turing machines with the cognitive machines, you observe that there's some hidden agency on the Turing machine to explain it. So you need to the programmers, you have the software and a lot of the stuff that is not part of the Turing machine, and also you have the cycling of the operation of the machine in the Vrije loop, and it has the half condition that is fundamental to explain that the computation is made. So, in short, there's many features that will distinguish the computing architecture and implementation from the universal computing machine, regardless the biologically organized cognitive machine. So, and this is one of the aspects that relate the quantum cognition observed in humans with the quantum world. This is just a short summary of what is relevant to our framework. It's a formal extension of autopoietic, so you can look at in here for more discussion on epistemological and social, etc. Discussion. But fundamentally, we are using and giving a mechanism for the notion of biological closure and structural coupling ensemble in a dynamical model that is universal to the construction of living systems, and as a consequence, they create a niche system duality that is explained like a self-machines. They are self-referenced, self-constructed, and self-organized, and they have some interesting cognitive properties that are working more like an hybrid computing. We're going to be a little more specific on this computing stuff, so we can discuss how this is working on a dynamical sense. So for a computer, you have the after computing machine, you have a finite state machine with a halting function and a cycle for reading a sequential step that is binded to the formulation of computability in terms of mathematical operations. There are some numbers that are not compatible. So there is some intrinsic characteristic of this Turing machine, but it's considered one of the general or universal computing machines. Our cognitive machines, they don't use exactly this architecture of input and output, so they are in a continuous loop of gathering some correlations between sensor activity and motor output in behavioral terms, and it is using a mixture of bit there we can call binary state as a classical, or also as a superposition of states as in quantum computing. In this case, we are going to have that the contextuality of the operation of the machine, as is acquired by a cognition paradigm, is going to answer depending on the contextuality, because on the construction of the dynamics is going to be a contextuality between the interaction of the medium and the structure that the machines construct for themselves. And also is going to be interference, because they are incompatible measurement on the machines, because the history of the interaction is incompatible. Also is going to be a violation, of course, of the total probability, the formulation of total probability, and it's going to be a non-commutative, because their order is going to matter on these machine interactions. So in this term, we are going to observe that the machine behaves like a Kolmogorov-Bias sort of a statistical machine, but also as a cognitive quantum machine, depending on the context, but it's going to also express a creative, more sort of properties that they are not related to Boolean or quantum logic, but are more related to the soft chaos that is present on the dynamics of the machine. A very short, or I think I'm going to be a little fast maybe, no, I'm not sure about the time, but I'm going to pass through the stage of the function of the dynamical closure modeling, and we start with a representation that of the vector space that we take as a functional symmetry, that in this sort of interaction, equilibrium interaction, that they are present on all living things, and they are basic for the metabolism, but they also appear as the interaction between more structured entities, like for example a neuron. You have some neurons that are excitatory and inhibitory. The same you have, for example, synaptic activity that is on-off, or you have, for example, a catalytic activity for an enzyme that they are on-off. So you have a general representation with these functional symmetries that are associated with some morphometric quantity that they rely on the unfolding, and particular unfolding of the system dynamics, that they are going to be related basically to the structure, the physical structure of the functional symmetry, and it's going to be different for different hierarchical levels. So all these properties relate to the to every one of the fundamental postulates of quantum mechanics. So you can be a matching between the functional symmetries and the first two principles of postulate of quantum mechanics that I didn't show very quickly. But you can see what is the matching, and we think we have a lot of matching with the quantum mechanics, because, as I said, the living system is recreating some meaningful space based on interaction with the medium. So in a way, you have to map the reality that you conceive of objectively with the internal structure. But for doing that, you need a system organized, for example, as we saw in the previous lecture, organized by path integral. There are basically trajectories on a stochastic space that is a set of functional symmetries into work, and is going to give some sort of a dynamics. One of the fundamental dynamics is the one that is associated to the Schrödinger equation, that in the case of biology is more representing the plasticity of the structure, the ability to change the morphometric quantities to improve the performance on this sort of mechanism. And this improvement is variational changes on the morphological quantities that also can be associated to the measurement of the state of the system. So resolving the Schrödinger equation, you have to use the forward and backward Kolmogorov equation with variational interference for the functional symmetries in the case of the morphometric quantities. But in this way, you are going to assemble a Hamiltonian that is going to contain the constraint of closure and structural coupling, such as you are going to end with the dynamics is more constrained by the Camp theorem, and you are going to be in a dynamic that is touching periodic motion, quasi-periodic motion, and chaotic motion. Additionally, this property of plasticity for the system is going to be assembled in different hierarchy levels, because you have, for example, in the nervous system, the interaction between a very small scale parameter, like for example, the biophysics of ion channels to yield the action potential. They are going to change the very critical parameters on the construction of the manifold that is implied in this construction. So here I'm finishing. with this, that is the biological organized cognitive machine, as a proposal for accounting for the underpinnings of biological, quantum cognition and decision making. And the answer for these underpinnings is related to the dynamics of the subsystem, including the nervous system and the metabolism for a living system that are going to unfold in different ways, that they are not going to follow the classical statistical probability description, but they are going to also contain that one. They are going to add the quantum cognition and the quantum probability description, in addition to more creative ways, like, for example, can be related to chaos or soft chaos. So, these are the main features of the quantum biological organized system. And you have to remember that it's an historical process of a generation of lineage, organized lineage. They're working in parallel, recurrent, and everyday ways. So you are going to end up with a contextual probability description, but it's going to be also informational, and it's going to be the underlying dynamics. So I think that's it.
Thank you, Carlos, for your talk. It's a big project. I can see it's connected many levels. We have room for a couple of questions. Anybody? Questions? Okay, Bill.
Thanks. I had a couple of questions. The Hameroff-Penrose quantum brain model has not been able to establish itself, and I wonder how you establish that the brain works in the way that you propose.
Second question?
The second question deals with evolution by natural drift. I think there's some questions there. You look at hospital disease created by hospitals themselves. The new surgical technique is to cut the humans, sew the human back up, and get them out of the hospital immediately, because the bacteria and the diseases have made a huge resurgence. So it seems to me like there's also a purposeful evolution taking place so that the organism can, in this case bacteria, can defend themselves.
Penrose and...
Well, regarding the Penrose hypothesis, I think that this is very different levels. That is more called quantum biology, because it's arguing that you have quantum effects, quantum physical effects on the properties of brain functions. I don't think it is going to be very far from our framework, because, as I said, one of the constraints of our model is that a very small perturbation of the system can be coupled to the change on the structure, and because of this change on the structure, it's going to also change the dynamics. So you can have some sort of a transmission line between changes in quantum mechanical terms through, for example, the function of other system, like a nervous system. Actually, there are some issues about that regarding the electromagnetic interference. You know that, for example, deep brain stimulation works changing the pattern of activity in similar way. Very small perturbation of a magnetic field, they can change the function of a nervous system in a way that is therapeutic. So I think that there is not exclusion of them. I'm not certainly believe on Penrose's hypothesis, but I think that you have room to accommodate very small changes in the dynamic that you are experiencing in the interaction with the medium, including your own medium. That's why because for example, you create immune responses. The other question regarding the evolution that they has proposed, we don't think they has proposed in this scenario, as in this hospital, you have some sort of selection that is artificial. But when you talk about natural evolution, we are telling that this language of interaction dynamics with the medium are going to change because of natural. So, for example, if there is some selection pattern in the environment that is become recurrent, then you can expect, for example, some change. Like in ecological terms, you have some parameters that are critical for speciation. But in the case of hospital, I think it's more artificial.
And for other questions? No? Nobody? Yes?
Could you perhaps elaborate a bit more on the notion of biological Hamiltonian or the plastic Hamiltonian, which was solved between the paths?
Well, as I represented here, Hamiltonian is in fact the construction of path, interaction path in a field of stochastic interaction. So for example, in the case of metabolism, you are going to have a bunch of chemical reaction that are going to form path of interaction and transformation of matter because there are chemical reactions coupled to that. So when you have some sort of pattern that is enclosure, that means it's close together in a circular path, you are going to have some additional features, like for example, the dynamic of the path is going to be more independent. For example, for the steady state, you know that the steady state is going to be independent because of the zero deficiency theorem. So when you take this path, you have some sort of association with what we call the morphometric quantities. That, for example, in this case, the efficiency of the reaction. So, for example, a little change on the efficiency of reaction is going to make the path, for example, for a parameter of activity, go faster. That means the stochastic path is going to have a representation smoother in the manifold of activity. So in this case, the refinement of the path is pushed by the plasticity of the system, that is a change on the morphometric quantities associated to the level of examination. In this case, for example, the chemical reaction network that is underlying the metabolic path. It can be also some circuit. In general, it's going to be an interaction network. So in the nervous system, for example, you are going to have change on the activity of neuron because of change in the plasticity, synaptic plasticity, and the intrinsic plasticity of neurons. So the propagation of activity across the nervous system is going to be smoother. And that is made because of the change in the Hamiltonian that is underlying these different levels of interactions.
Okay, nobody else? Okay, I had a question, but just like a random question. Have you, not so random, but it came to my mind randomly. Have you heard of a model of natural language processing called computational verbs? Have you seen that? No, I'll show you, because they compute with chaotic structures.
Yeah.
For
I can comment, I think you will have an additional topic, right? So very quickly, I think that this is, in practical terms, can be very useful in machine learning. So in machine learning, you have this mechanism, but it's not presented like this, but in actual practice is making a Hamiltonian that is hidden in the structure of the data. And the way that it's constructing it because it is finding some target function that is diffusion and process on the pattern of the data. So, and one of the things that make the actual performance of machine learning so amazing is the ability to get a huge data set that represent the historical process of the system. So that is my explanation of why machine learning is so improving now. And it's going to be also a huge area for research in the future.
We'll thank again Carlos. Thank you. So we have now the last